Hey friends, so today I'm going to walk you through how to do a valve check on the Honda CBR650F. This is the first time I've ever done it, but I'm going to try to record it and walk you through it. Now as a starting point, we're going to have the gas tank up and the engine air filter housing exposed. So in order to get to this point, you might want to reference my previous video that shows how to do this. It basically involves taking the fairings off and then propping your gas tank up like this. This is also a wonderful time to clean up your mess of a bike when everything's exposed. But I'm also going to tell you, you might not realize the manual suggests that you purchase a new valve head cover gasket. I'm going to have in the description links to the various portions of the manual that describe what I'm about to do, and then also all the parts that I ordered in order to get here. So first we have to disconnect a bunch of stuff. The first thing that the manual shows is this switch connector. This is a really poor design, so I wanted to zoom in on here so that you can see it. This basically I just yanked up and I forced it, it bent it a little here, so just so you know, this is what it's supposed to look like because the manual doesn't show. Next is the clutch cable that has a wire guide tucked up in here. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see, but we're going to go ahead and disconnect that. Moving over, we've got another wire clip here to release, and then on the left side another one right here. Well, I broke this one coming up. And this one I managed not to break by kind of sticking a screwdriver up here and depressing the sides of that latch. Next we're going to unclip the front wheel speed sensor and the map sensor. The front wheel sensor clip has another one of these really poorly designed things. I sort of broke that one pulling it off also. And then the last step is there's a small vacuum hose. It's actually this one. It's kind of hard to see, but you'll be able to tell because it plugs into this same unit area where these other clips are. It plugs in down here. So you disconnect that. Now I could have done this before, but I didn't. I'm going to remove the air cleaner housing here. And I'm going to remove these 6 screws that are around the air intake ducts. These screws were pretty tight on my bike, and this one here wanted to strip on me, and it almost did, so be careful with that. Then remove those. Next we can slightly pull up on here, and then pay attention to these hoses up here, and they're little metal clips that will remove those and then pull this whole unit up. The last thing holding the air cleaner housing in is the pair control valve, and that has a little clip under here. It's really difficult to see, but it's tucked up here, and we have to release that before we can pull this up. Once that's settled, the whole housing comes off. There are some O-rings under here, so don't lose those. You can clean that out. You don't have to remove the filter. I recently pulled it out and inspected it, and I know that mine's fine, but this is a good time to clean the air intake filter. And then this is what we're looking at this point. Okay, so this is the pair control solenoid valve, and in order to remove this, we need to disconnect this black clip here, and then 2 more hoses, this one back there, and there's one on the other side back here as well. So we're going to remove those. And then that should come right out once you untangle these hoses. What I did was I used a long flathead screwdriver to kind of help pry up while I was pushing on the metal clips, so that might be how you want to do it. I'm going to undo the clutch cable from this wire guide that's up here, but in the meantime, hey look, we're at the spark plugs. So those of you who've asked how to change the spark plugs or inspect them, this is what you're supposed to do. You got to get all this work to get those exposed. So I'm actually going to be changing my spark plugs here. This is some info from the manual on the spark plugs. I'm going to put in the comment section my spark plugs that I selected, but here's all the info you'll need. Now we have to remove the throttle body, and I'm actually kind of bummed because my throttle is set beautifully, but we're going to have to undo the throttle screws, so we're going to lose that. I'm actually going to put a drop of paint pen on here to show where my adjustments are so that I can try to quicken the time for me to set it back. Now it's time to disconnect the fuel injector sub-harness here, as well as this black connector and this blue connector up here. Now unfortunately, because I didn't fully remove the gas tank, which you could do, but I'm going to have to disconnect this fuel line right here, and I'm going to have to figure out a way, because the tank is full, to stop it from flowing out. Okay, well I prepped myself thinking it was going to drain fuel out, but it didn't, so I guess you can just disconnect it and do this. I make no promises about this. I really don't have intricate knowledge of how these things work. I just know how to follow directions, hence me trying to do something this complicated. Anyway, that seems to have worked out. I'm going to do this a little bit out of order of the manual, but I'm going to undo these breather hoses or whatever you'd call them. 2 screws each, and there's obviously 4 of them, 1 for each cylinder. Now, I make no guarantee that this is going to work, but in order to try to preserve the settings on my throttle cables, I'm going to try to remove the screws with the black paint on their heads, because that will keep the main throttle cables in their current position. So luckily I have this weird tool because the angle is pretty difficult, but just so you know, the alternative, the manual is asking me to remove the locking nuts and the throttle cables and pull them out so that when we lift the throttle body out, it can be looped up over the coils, the little circular things that they're resting on. I know this part's going to suck from my work with the shadow, but I'm going to try to lift the throttle body out of these rubber things, and I'm going to use this gigantic flathead screwdriver to help pry it. Be super careful with this. It's not my fault if you damage your equipment trying this. Okay guys, no joke, this took me more than an hour to remove. So this is not for the faint of heart, and be ready for some back-breaking pulling. The way I finally ended up getting it off was with that big flathead screwdriver, and then I put a little bit of WD-40 around the edges. And then it was mostly this action, pulling up this way, that was helpful. But it took a combination of stuff. There really wasn't one thing that I did that worked. Yeah, really relieved that that's off. Okay. So now I see why the fuel injector sub-harness connection was removed. So basically I just have this and then the throttle cable. So I'm going to try to take those off the drum again without removing these, but I'll let you know how that works. There's also an evap hose connection here that we're going to undo before we can pull up the throttle body. I'm actually going to see if I can get away with leaving the throttle body up there. That way I don't have to disconnect the throttle cables. It's a stupid thing, but I'm just trying to avoid that. I'm also going to mess with this a little bit to try to block off those holes because this is really filthy down here and I don't want stuff falling into the engine. Now we are going to disconnect the crankcase breather hose right here and then remove this rubber heat shield gasket. Now to remove all 4 of the spark plug cover caps. The spark plug wires are way too short, but there is a little clip here that you can release to get a little bit more length. Once the spark plug caps are out and out of the way, which they're quite long and I just kind of tucked them out of the way there are 4 cylinder head cover bolts, and they're located, 1 in the middle here, 1 in the center, and then there are 2 on the right side. Those bolts are 10 millimeters. Overall, I'd say that I wish I'd cleaned my bike better before I did this because the dirt is everywhere, and then also I'm not sure if you would be able to replace the spark plugs without removing the throttle body because it is really cramped in there, so I'm not quite sure. I'm combining the spark plugs with the valve check just because that seemed easier to me to do, so I'd probably recommend the same if you're going through all this trouble. Now we gotta figure out a way to get this off. So it's a super tight fit. I think it's mostly getting stuck in the wires up here, so I'm just gonna keep trying to get it out. There's a coolant hose right here, so I'm trying to keep that attached. But other than that, I'm just trying to shove up on all these wires in a way that allows me to lift it up enough. Okay, so far I moved it up and then sort of a little this way. A lot of work to get this thing off. Time to remove the timing cover cap thing. Now it says we rotate the crankshaft clockwise and align the T mark with the index notch on the crankcase cover. So I lined up those marks, but these marks are not flat yet, so it says to rotate it 1 full turn to get it in the right position. I did that, and then now it's correctly aligned as shown right here. Okay, so time has passed, it's now night, and I'm back at this. I'm going to be measuring the valve clearances here, and we start with cylinders 1 and then cylinder 3, and the intake is on the inside, the exhaust is on the front or outside, and so first we're going to be measuring the intake valve clearances. Okay, so first cylinder 1 and cylinder 3 intake valves. There are 2 intake valves per cylinder, so there's 1 here that you can see and then 1 just on the other side of the partition right here. And so what I'm doing is I'm inserting these feeler gauges down around the cam or whatever it is and seeing what the largest combination of sizes is that will fit. So in my case, the leafs adding up to 0.18 did not fit, but the 0.1 plus the 0.07 did fit. So that means that my intake 1 for cylinder 1 is 0.17. So that falls just within the specs. So now I just turned this 360 degrees clockwise, and I'm going to measure the intakes on cylinders 2 and 4. So with the intakes, we were looking for this clearance up here, and with the exhaust, we're looking at this different clearance here. Now that I have all the intakes measured, I'm going to back it up 180 degrees and then measure the exhaust on cylinders 2 and 4. For the final exhaust valves, we're bringing this another 160 or 360 around, another full turn from the first exhaust cylinders, and now we'll be measuring 1 and 3. So I measured all 16 valves, and they're all within spec, but some of them are at the lower edge of it, so I actually am going to go ahead and open it up and make the valve adjustment. That's going to take a couple of days while I order the shims that I need to get it to be right, exactly spec. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload this video, and then I'll bring a follow-up video that shows how to remove the cams and actually adjust the shims. Thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate all the views, all the support. So like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think about this video, and have a good one, guys.